but was to establish a pattern of living a godly life that would cast aside all doubts. When those who are younger than him saw him, what they should see was one who was a picture of what they should be as a child of God. In the same respect, I believe each of us face these challenges. We do have those that are older than us, who we respect and honor and seek advice from in our lives. We also have those of a younger generation that are looking up to us and desiring to be like us. We must establish the characteristics within our lives that will propel us forward to be leaders that we must be. Leaders that are respected by the old and the young because our lives and our lives of character and biblical wisdom. There are many passages and books of the Bible that would examine to find out how we should be leaders and how we ought to be. But one of the greatest books and instructions to leaders is the book of Proverbs. As most of us know, Solomon was a king. And he has been known as the wisest man to walk the face of the earth. And through the book of Proverbs, Solomon is teaching his son and those that would be leaders and religious leaders and political leaders that wisdom that God gave him as a king. None of us are kings, but we are called to be leaders. And this attitude and characteristics that made a great king in 1000 BC when Solomon ruled also make great 21st century leaders. So let us look at some guidance that Solomon gives us so that we can be the leaders and examples that we must be to this world and this church. So let's go back to the book of Proverbs, beginning in Proverbs chapter 8. Proverbs chapter 8, as we examine the characteristics of a leader, and one of those characteristics is that of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 15. Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 15. A leader must have wisdom. Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 15. By me kings reign, and princes decree justice. The context of Proverbs chapter 8 is wisdom is expressing its importance. And in verse 15, wisdom tells us that in order for a king to rule, he needs to have wisdom. All leaders are in desperate need of God's wisdom and direction. One who is wise does not simply know more than others. It's not just a head knowledge of knowing many different facets and parts of life, but it is a spiritual discernment that allows him to see further ahead than others. If we are to be leaders, we must seek God and ask God for wisdom each and every day of our lives. The wisdom of God allows us to see ahead, and as we put a plan in action, allows us to see the outcomes and potential failures and good things of those actions. And as Solomon began his reign, God gave him the opportunity to ask for anything. He said, you can ask for riches, you can ask for this, you can ask for that. But Solomon didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for power. What he realized and understood, and he asked for wisdom. 2 Chronicles chapter 1 and verse 10. Give me now wisdom and knowledge, that I may go out and come in before this people. For who can judge this thy people that is so great? Solomon expressed the importance of wisdom in his life in these simple words of Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 7. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, with all that getting, get understanding. Through wisdom, we can have the judgment and understanding that we need to lead and be the leaders that we need to be. One of the first characteristics of a leader is that they have wisdom and they ask God for wisdom. They seek His face for wisdom. Wisdom is a principal thing in our lives as leaders. We need that spiritual discernment. Not just head knowledge, but an understanding of the outcomes and seeing further ahead of how the results of those actions and things that we choose and those choices we make. A leader must have wisdom. But the next thing a leader must have is integrity. Proverbs chapter 16. Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 12. A leader must have integrity. We need wisdom to see ahead, to have the understanding and the discernment. But we need integrity to govern our lives. Proverbs 16 and verse 12. It is an abomination to kings to commit wickedness, for the throne is established by righteousness. Integrity is hard to come by these days. It has been said that the millennium generation, the generation that I just made the cut into, starts from 1982 and goes on, the millennium generation, this younger generation, can be characterized by being the most selfish generation this world has ever seen. They live in a world where outward appearance and social status reigns more than doing what is right for mankind in the cause of Christ. But I mean, who can blame them? Look at the examples they have, the role models that they pick, politicians, celebrities. These are the epitome of selfishness and the lack of integrity. This is the exact opposite of what the Apostle Paul challenged Timothy to do in 1 Timothy chapter 4. And in this verse, in verse 12 of 1 Timothy chapter 4, just about every aspect of what kind of an example that we should be deals with the matter of integrity of life. As a leader, your personal life must match up with the standards that you require from those underneath you. The U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower put it this way: in order to be a leader, a man must have followers. And to have followers, a man must have their confidence. Hence, the supreme quality of a leader is unquestionably integrity. Without it, no real success is possible. No matter whether it is in a gang, or on a sports field, or in an army, or in an office. If a man's associates find him guilty of phoniness, if they find that he lacks forthright integrity, he will fail. His teachings and actions must square with each other. The first great need, therefore, is integrity and high purpose. This generation seems to think that the old adage, do as I say, not as I do, works. But in reality, it is totally false. Our children, our subordinates, and those whom we minister to must be able to look at our lives and say that our lives back up what we say. It should be do as I do, not as I say. The characteristics of a godly leader, the characteristics of a leader that we need in this generation, it is that they need wisdom. They need the spiritual discernment from God. They need integrity. Their lives must be an example of what they say. Establish a pattern, establish an example that we can say, do as I do, not as I say. Or if we say one thing, they can look at our lives and say, what you're saying is exactly how you live and what you do. A leader needs integrity. But thirdly, a leader seeks good advice. Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 14. Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 14. A leader seeks good advice. Where no counsel is, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Every leader must be willing to seek advice, specifically good advice. He will realize that he does not have all the answers and must be willing to seek out advice when dealing with the situations in life and situations with who he's leading in his organization that he's overseeing. In 1990, General Northern Suburbs was Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. forces in Operation Desert Shield, undertaken to prevent Iraq from moving against Saudi Arabia. During the days of the war, he assembled 765,000 troops from 28 different countries, with hundreds of ships and thousands of planes and tanks. This is a massive army that he is overseeing and is in charge of. And General Schwarzkopf called General Colin Powell, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at that time, every evening on the telephone to discuss the events of the day. One day, a news reporter asked Schwarzkopf, why? Why do you call him every single day? You are at the top of your career. Everybody is looking to you. They understand that you have knowledge and understanding of what you're doing. Why are you calling him every single day? And he responded with this simple answer. He was the only person in the world who knew what I was trying to do. He listened to my ideas, helped me form strategies, and expose my errors in judgment daily. when leading people, we must be willing to seek out the advice that we need to successfully accomplish the task that we have at hand. Sometimes it will be found from those who we lead, and other times it will be found by other leaders that we have in our acquaintances and friends. A leader must be willing to seek out advice, understanding we don't have all the answers. But yet there is somebody who perhaps has been there and done that. We can go and we can ask them for help, ask them for guidance, ask them for understanding. The characteristics of a leader is one who has wisdom, one who has integrity, one who seeks good advice, and fourthly, one who seeks and has self-control. Proverbs chapter 28 and verse 15. Proverbs chapter 28 and verse 15 has self-control over his life. As a roaring lion and a raging bear, so is a wicked ruler over the poor people. Solomon also mentioned the aspect of self-control this way. Proverbs chapter 31, verses 4 and through 5. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert judgment of any of the afflicted. Though this is a good warning as to why we should be disciplined in our lives as far as alcohol and drinks is concerned, it is also a warning to leaders to exhibit self-control. Otherwise, they would eventually destroy themselves. Another U.S. president's wife, Mrs. Johnson, Lyndon Johnson's wife, but found that Lyndon Johnson was overweight. And so one day his wife challenged him with this blunt assertion: you can't rule a country if you can't run yourself. Respecting Mrs. Johnson's wise observations, the president lost 23 pounds. So she saw he was overweight, he was eating too much, and he didn't have discipline or self-control over his life, and she saw that as an issue. And she said, if you can't control your life, if you can't control your body, if you don't have that self-control, how on earth will you ever be able to run a country? And in 1 Timothy chapter 3, the Apostle Paul lays out what we would call the requirements of a minister. And almost all these requirements, there's a root in the matter of self-control. The minister, the bishop, is to be sober, is to be not given to wine, is no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre. He's patient. He's not a brawler. He has self-control over his life. He's disciplined. The leader, by God's grace, must be able to bear the stress of his position and exhibit self-control to those around him. You must be able to keep your temper in check and not fall into habits that will destroy you and your example. Look through history. How many leaders have fallen because they have not exhibited self-control and discipline in their lives? How many politicians have made a disgrace of their office because they loved money or they loved other things and it distracted them, and because they did not exhibit self-control, it destroyed their lives, it destroyed their families' lives. I mean, read the news recently. How many people have committed murder and other things because they did not exhibit self-control? A leader must have self-control. Another thing that a leader must have is must be aware of his influence. Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 2. Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 2. Do you understand the importance? Do you understand and are you aware of your influence? Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 2. Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. As a leader, you are looked up to for guidance and held up on a pedestal by those that follow you. They desire to talk like you. They desire to act like you. They desire to be like you. Growing up, there was a famous basketball player. In America, they have basketball. And there was an American basketball player whose fame grew to the point that everybody desired to be like him. And everywhere you went, you heard the phrase, I want to be like Mike, which is Michael Jordan. He established such an example. He established such a life. Everybody wanted to be like him. I think of my personal life. I go and I work on something at my home. The other day I was working on a printer of mine. My son wants to be right there working with me. I take out my tools. He wants to grab that same screwdriver and do the exact same thing I'm doing. He follows me. He looks up to me. He wants to do everything that I'm doing. Are you aware of your influence? Do you realize the influence you have to those around you, to family members, to friends, to co-workers, to those that perhaps over the ministry that you have, that you're leading? Are you aware of the influence, the impact you have on people? Too many leaders are unaware of their influence and must step up and be the example that others should follow. Are you aware of your influence? The characteristics of a leader is one that has wisdom, one who has integrity, one who has self-control, one who is aware of his influence, and one who's in submission to God. Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 1. Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 1. Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 1. Submission to God. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. The captain of a ship looked into a dark night and saw faint lights in the distance. Immediately he told his signalmen to send out the message, alter your course 10 degrees south. Promptly in return was received, alter your course 10 degrees north. The captain was angered. His command was being ignored. So he sent out the second message, alter your course 10 degrees south. I am the captain. Soon another message was received. Alter your course 10 degrees north. I am Seaman Third Class Jones. Immediately the captain sent a third message, knowing the fear it would invoke. Alter your course 10 degrees south. I am a battleship. Then the reply came, alter your course 10 degrees north. I am a lighthouse. In the midst of our dark and foggy times, all sorts of voices are shouting orders into the night, telling us what to do, how to adjust our lives. Out of the darkness, one voice signals something quite opposite to what the rest is saying. Sometimes it sounds almost absurd, but the voice happens to be the light of the world, the light of the world, and we ignore it at our peril. It happens to be the voice of Jesus Christ guiding and directing us and telling which direction we should go. As with every area of our life, perhaps the most important characteristic of a leader is their submission to God. Even in the list of that Timothy was to be an example of, we find that we need to be an example in faith. Perhaps the greatest verses that have been a strong guidebook to my life have been Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And I've used it many times in my messages, and I will continue to use it because it just speaks profoundly to my life. It says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and perfect, acceptable and perfect will of God. In the first 11 chapters of Romans, Paul details everything that we've been given because of Christ. We have been justified freely by His grace, Romans 3 and verse 24. We have been given direct access to God and assured that no matter what we go through in life, God will always be there, Romans chapter 8, verses 35 through 39. We have a new purpose in life of proclaiming the gospel to this heathen world, Romans chapter 10, verses 14 through 15. And as the apostle begins to conclude his thoughts in Romans, he stresses the importance of presenting your life to God. He says, I beseech you, therefore, or in common vernacular, because of everything I've just shown you. He says, because of everything that we have received from God through Christ, it would just make sense that we would submit our lives to God. And as we seek God's direction each and every day, He will direct us into the ways and positions that will glorify Him best. A man wrote, the world needs leaders who cannot be bought, whose word is their promise, who put character above wealth, who possess opinions and a will, who are no larger than their vocations, who do not hesitate to take chances, who will not lose their individuality in a crowd, who will be honest in small things as well as in great things, who will make no compromise with wrong, whose ambitions are not confined to their own selfish desires, who will not say they do it because everybody else does it, who are true to their friends through the good report and evil report, in adversity as well as in prosperity, who do not believe that shrewdness, cunning, and hard-headedness are the best qualities for winning success, who are not ashamed or afraid to stand for truth when it is unpopular, who can say no with emphasis, although the rest of the world says yes. As we leave here today, let us examine our lives. Look at these characteristics and see how you can apply them in the positions that you fill, whether it's father, whether it's husband, whether it's teacher, whether it's manager, whether it's sports captain, whether it's just an older upperclassman in your school. So many that had potential to be leaders of today have failed because of lack of one or more of these areas in their life. They lacked wisdom. They lacked integrity. They lacked self-control. They did not seek good advice. They did not submit their lives to God. They were not aware of their influence. And because of that, they have failed as leaders. But what we need this day, in this generation, and in our churches, are men and women who will be aware and seek God's face and ask for wisdom. And will live a life of integrity. That what they say, what their lives will back up exactly what they say. Will have a life that seeks good advice. A life that practices self-control and discipline in their lives. You understand your weaknesses. You understand your challenges. And you develop godly principles from God's Word that will help govern you and create discipline in your life to be the person that you ought to be. They will be aware of their influence, understanding that you have influence on your family, you have influence on your friends, you have influence on those that you work with and those that are in your communities. And they will ultimately live a life that's in submission to God, seeking His face daily, presenting their lives as a living sacrifice, taking yourself off the throne of your life and putting God in His rightful place in your life as commander-in-chief and guidance and director and pilot and the main driver and leading your life in your life. We must be the example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for that word. We thank you for the testimonies and guidance and direction that you gave to us through Solomon, through the Apostle Paul, to guide and direct our lives.